Hey guys, it's another Randcast short I thought you guys might appreciate. So on the signature spot, this popped up. First off, I like the picture of a young Scott Hall and a young Kurt Hennig. And, Scott Hall is absolutely 100% right about Kurt Hennig. Unless you are an asshole, The other thing is like, idiots and wrestlers that aren't pro wrestlers think that being said, oh, well, if you work a match for them, an enhancement match, and put them over on TV, if they're so given, that means I can get my shit in. Guess what? That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about when you're in the ring and the mindset being, how can I make this guy look good? An enhancement match, a job match, is not the place for that. Now, that being said, it also brought to mind, I forgot this, and this is what I'm talking about. Someone said it about Frank Morrell to me back when I was a kid. Someone said it to me about Bronco Lubitsch when I was a kid. They've forgotten more about wrestling than we will ever know. And that's what brings to mind this. All of a sudden, I'm the one forgetting about it, Even today, the youngsters love the NWO. They love the Razor Ramon, and then they love the transition of Scott Hall and the NWO for WCW. Matter of fact, it's what most of them even remember because they weren't born yet or they were babies when the NWO ran rampant throughout WCW. But yes, I thought folks would appreciate the fact that I did get to work with Scott Hall when he was first Razor Ramon at World Wrestling Entertainment. At the time, it was probably still World Wrestling Federation. And it's kind of an interesting story. Johnny Smith was there. And if you guys don't know, I think some of you factotums know who Johnny Smith was. If you don't, he was affiliated with the Hearts. He worked like the Hearts, and he was a really solid, tight worker for Calgary Stampede Wrestling and Stu Hart working with the Hart family. In Japan is where Johnny really cut his teeth and made his bones as the British Bulldog in Japan. Good guy, good hand, and actually looked like he could be Owen Hart's cousin and kind of worked like Owen, but did not steal Owen's shit. The guy was tight, he was solid, and he had mastered the Japanese style and really meant something over there. So anyway, one way, shape, or form, one of the Harts, probably Owen, had talked to WWE about bringing him in and getting a look at him. We were doing a television taping, and I can't remember if it was a 2-day taping or a 3-day taping, but it was one of those times when I was doing WWE extra work, and I wasn't doing it because it was fun. It was kind of fun, but I wasn't doing it to pay dues. They knew who I was already. It's never a bad idea to go up and network, but the bottom line is they had raised the pay grade from $150 a night to $250 a night and trans. Sign me up, because as a young guy, I needed the money. And that was more than anyone else was paying extras or non-contract talent at the time. That being said, I had gotten over with Tony Garea. I earned Tony Garea's respect. I love Tony Garea, and I would love to see him do a shoot interview, and I'd love to see him do an interview with Briscoe and Bradshaw, because that would be something to learn from the smart person in wrestling, the smart young man in wrestling. Tony was a guy who carried the undercard matches and most of the new talent and helped get over so much talent over his probably 40-year or maybe even 50-year career in World Wrestling Entertainment. So, for some reason, they were giving Johnny Smith the tryout, but they weren't really treating him well, and I think that's only because they didn't know who he was. And besides that, TV tapings were crazy at the time, especially for the agents who were getting older. So I overheard Tony saying something, well, I don't know who I'm going to put you with because Owen's doing this and this one's doing that. And I sat up and said, pardon me, Tony, I would love to work with Johnny Smith because I'll get him over like a motherfucker. And you can get it. You guys finally get a chance to see what I can do inside the ring. It's a hell of an idea, Fox. And then put us together. So the first night, I don't remember who I worked, but we sat in the gorilla position waiting for the dark match that never came. And in part, I think they were testing Johnny Smith's mental fortitude to see if they could get him to be an asshole. And to his credit, the guy had class, and we sat there, and we kind of got to know each other. I wouldn't say we were BAE, but I respected the guy. And when I found out what kind of person he was, I certainly had no problem putting him over and was even more motivated to make him look good out there, you know. Second night comes, I walk in, there's the grease board, and on the second match, I'm booked against Scott Hall. Now here's something that happened the night before. One way, shape, or form, I was paired up with a young kid from Wisconsin, and he was a pain in the ass. And I want to say he wrestled independently as JT Lightning. There's been 100 indie guys named JT Lightning, but this was before he was an indie guy. And he was annoying as all hell with the questions and the bullshit. But wherever we did this taping, during that ride, you could not help but like this kid, even though he was a pain in the ass, because he really loved wrestling and was really jacked about going to do extra work for WWE. So that first night, I kind of took him under my wing, and as I was sitting there in gorilla and walking back and forth from gorilla position with Johnny Smith, noticed he was going to go out there and work with Scott Hall, who was just doing that new finish called the Razor's Edge. Now, to you guys, that was a new move, you know. But for me, a guy that worked every night in Memphis, and sometimes I would be the guy that would work with a guy that was coming in just for a day or two or three or just for a day, or guys that were trying things, or we were trying new things on the house shows, or we had time to do so. I don't know what it was called, but I know I've taken said move before and knew that it was a fucking work if done properly. On the road, when you're wrestling with people and you're wrestling 8 times a week and some guys every night, you know damn well that no matter what position they put you in, they weren't gonna hurt you. I took the fucking move and didn't fucking get hurt. So Scott Hall was getting the kinks out of that one and also honing the gimmick. If you notice, Scott Hall was around a long, long time before he finally got over, you know. And to his credit, and I am not running down Scott Hall, I'm talking about the mental turpitude and fortitude that man had to hang in there, and the amount of humility he had to hang in there and fuck up on a couple of opportunities and still stick it out and then come out and be one of the most memorable characters in wrestling of our time, the bad guy. Well, that being said, at the time, I was coming off the road, and when you come off the road and you're working every night, you can't help but look around that locker room and think, this is bullshit. I could outwork that motherfucker. I could outwork this motherfucker, until I look in the mirror on all those giants and say, yeah, I can, but that don't mean shit until I get that look or that gimmick, you know. So, bottom line is, it probably was one of the first Razor's Edges he'd done, and that first night he went and dropped that kid on the back of his head and knocked that little shit out because Scott Hall hadn't honed it yet. And the guy was so tall that he could have broken that kid's neck, no fucking problem. So the kid comes to, one of the referees and Tony Gurria were like, what happened? I grabbed the kid and brought him down the hallway where nobody was, so it wouldn't attract attention or this poor kid get branded as a pussy, even though he wasn't a pussy. He was knocked the fuck out, and he woke up in a panic, anxiety-ridden, not knowing where in the fuck he was. Okay? Tony asked me what happened because he hadn't seen the match. He'd seen me scampering with this kid, practically carrying him. I said, I'll tell you what happened. Scott Hall is a stiff piece of shit that never learned this is a fucking work, Tony. That's what happened. Now, as soon as I said it, I said, uh-oh. Did I fucking say that out loud? In a sense, I had the right to say that because I was, in fact, a fucking worker. And I turned around, and there was Scott Hall. And I said, well, what do you want me to say? It's true. It's a work. I've taken that move before, and the guy didn't knock me out. So the next night, I'm on the board, like I said, working Scott Hall match 2 or 3 during the second taping. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, after the first taping, during the film change, they call Fox Smith. Fox Smith. So we go out there and have a great match, and they got a chance to get a really good look at him. They didn't know what to do with him only because of this. He worked that Japanese style because he'd been there so long, and there's no problem with that Japanese style. But number one, at that time in the 90s, early 90s, probably 92, 91 maybe, America wasn't ready for the Japanese style, but the talent roster for WWE wasn't ready for the Japanese style. When we came back from the match, Vince McMahon himself came up and said, boys, if there was any doubt in anyone's mind tonight when they got here or after that first taping that wrestling was fake, you certainly erased that. That's what a worker did. You met the guy you were working with in the middle. If he laid it in on you, you fired back just as hard. That was his style. I didn't fault him. He didn't break my teeth. He didn't dislocate any joints or my jaw. He didn't bloody my nose or my lip or even blacken my eye. That's how he worked. You got to do that, otherwise the match ain't fucking compelling. That being said, Terry Taylor, and that's when I first made friends with Terry, and he was stepping down from Red Rooster to agent, but he was still the Red Rooster, and he was doing enhancement matches at the time as the Red Rooster until his talent contract ran out, and he came over and chewed out Johnny Smith for a superplex off the top, which it was a snap, and I was like, Terry, I was okay. I knew what was coming, and I've even taken that before, probably from Rex King or Steve Dahl in a house show down in Memphis, no problem, you know. Then 2 matches later, I've got to work Scott Hall, and I'm like, fuck me. I'm going to get my ass fucking handed to me for saying that shit I said the night before. And I'm waiting for it, you know. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, how can I get my ass handed to me when we just got put over by Vince in that dark match? Oh, God, here it comes, you know. So I'm talking to Scott, and I'm listening to Scott, and we're putting shit together. It's not fucking brain fucking surgery, especially for me. Like I told you, I had timing from working 8 to 15 times a week down in Memphis just a few weeks prior to this taping. We go out there and do business. Everything's going okay. And you can see the match. Look it up. Jerry Fox versus Scott Hall. He picks me up for the razor's edge, and you can see the terror in my eyes because I thought, here comes the fucking receipt for opening my mouth, and I'll be goddamned if I wasn't thanking the Lord when he set me down like I put a baby in a bassinet. Thank God. And once again, that's an attribute to Scott Hall because he could have taken liberties with me, but he didn't. Scott Hall was a businessman that knew if it got out there that he was killing people with that move, it would do nothing but make him look like shit. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this.